You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, community radio with a global soul. Also streaming online at savsoundings.org. That's SAVSOUNDINGS.org.
Check, check, 1, 2. Looking like a little country. Some rock and roll and blues. 'Cause we sure love playing for good people like you. Let me know if you can hear me. Check, check, 1, 2.
Welcome to Music Local and Sustainable, the radio show that features discussions with and the music of local musicians. I am your host, Dave Lake. This is the first episode of the show, and I wanted to use it to explain what this show is trying to accomplish. Each week, a different Savannah or Low Country musician or band will be featured for an hour discussion and performance of their music. We will talk to each artist and play some of their music. Topics discussed will cover a wide range of issues about the musicians because each conversation is focused on that musician and what they want to talk about. We will be playing music that they will be performing live in the studio, live music recorded in concert performance, and music from CDs and EPs. The show will have established musicians and bands and new musicians, from classical to jazz to singer-songwriters to rock, punk, to blues, to country, and everything in between. The purpose of this show is to introduce you to local musicians with whom you might not be familiar, or to give you more in-depth knowledge about those musicians with whom you are familiar. Savannah has a rich local musical scene. I am hoping that through these shows, you as residents of Savannah and the Low Country will be able to become more familiar with these local musicians and begin to follow them, primarily by attending their live performances around town, by purchasing their CDs, and by encouraging your local bar, restaurant, or club to feature these musicians. You can find listings of the performances by these artists around town by going to Connect Savannah, either by picking up a copy or going to connectsavannah.com, Connect Savannah being one word, or you can go to DoSavannah.com, again, Do Savannah is one word, and look at the big calendar page. Or you can go to Larry Jack's listing of Savannah bar, club, musician performances at HissingLawns.com. That's HISSINGLAWNS.com. Now, let's explore some of the musicians featured on early shows. In the first show, I will feature the gypsy jazz band Velvet Caravan. I visited them at a rehearsal and asked them first to introduce themselves and then to describe the music that they play.
Hello, I'm Ricardo Ochoa. I play violin with the band.
My name is Jesse Muckman, and I play percussion with the band.
My name is Eric Dunn. I play bass.
I'm Sasha Strujas, play guitar.
I'm Jared Hall, piano.
And organ.
And keyboard things.
Accordion.
Yes.
Everything keyboard.
Yes.
How do you characterize the music of Velvet Caravan?
Eclectic.
Well, yeah, eclectic, fun,
Fusion.
Energetic.
virtuosistic. Is that a word?
It is now.
Virtuosic.
I'll chime in. Psychotic.
Don't forget that. It's the most important spice. I would agree, yeah.
That was Sasha Strungus who said psychotic, which begins to introduce you to his interesting sense of humor. Later in the interview, they discussed their compositional approach, and they performed a new song, Waltz Noir, which they later performed with the Savannah Philharmonic. Here you hear an early in-development version. You have original tunes as well. What I'm interested to find out is what's the compositional process for those original tunes?
The compositional process, I mean, I'm speaking for myself. When I approach a tune, I think thematically, and I usually put chords below it, and then I start to branch out in terms of a structure, like how I actually want the piece to develop, whether it be like if I want it to be a rondo or a different type of piece. And then I bring it to these guys, and then from there, what we do is they take the material that I bring them and they expand on it in their own individual way. Like a tune that we're going to play for you is a tune that actually Jared wrote. I'm not sure about your compositional process. Is it different or is it similar?
Well, my problem is I feel like if I can describe a certain wave, it's like hot or cold, extreme or non-extreme. So I feel like with me coming up with this waltz, I feel like at the ultimate it's the tragedy of everything happening in life, like the death, the murders, but also these wonderful things like in light. So when we started working on this tune, they're like, "Oh,
I'm scared.
no!" They're like, "Oh, this is like noir. This is like jazz noir." Like, so when I wrote this song, I was thinking a waltz. I was thinking a nice waltz, Viennese or Parisian. Viennese would be more, a little quicker. But I was thinking waltz. But
So it's like waltz noir.
I always say it sounds like it should have been in The Shining.
Yeah. And this is what we hope to do with this particular tune that is called Waltz Noir, and we're working on it. We still haven't really performed it. It's going to be in our next album.
so I came up with this quick line. And then pretty soon the band, I brought that to the band and they're like, "Oh, let's try this." And then Ricardo and Sasha, everybody came up with their own lines.
Doesn't that sound like somebody getting stabbed?
But after somebody got stabbed.
Yeah, after they're stabbed. They're like sitting there with a knife in their chest.
Because it's a song in a minor key, but it feels major sometimes. It's a sadder feeling, but sometimes it feels happier. So it takes you back and forth,
Yeah, so he brought that first part of it, and then we were like, oh, well, that's not enough. We got to take it somewhere else. So we collaborated into this other section, which is a happier section. It's just
You want to play that part like the separate?
Yeah. So it goes to it goes to a happy place, It's like there's a light after the whole.
But then it's just
But
back
then
to
there's this
darkness.
huge contrast that we went to, like this was it the A flat?
Yeah, that's where it gets dark again.
Dark
Yeah.
again. Then they start utilizing things. That's why I bring things like the Chinese, the symbol. It sounds like a tam tam, where you have this sort of
We did two together.
loud, sort of like this loud expanse that sounds dark and menacing. So you can create that character, the difference in character.
We love to play it, but before we play it, we've been playing it maybe two times before today. But Sasha and I keep forgetting this one line, so if you don't mind, we're just gonna go over it really quick.
You guys want to work that out?
Yeah, we'll just yeah. You do that and I'll do this, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. Okay, let's do one more time.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Good. And then there's that transition to the E flat major part. That is okay. Yeah. Okay.
Hold on, what was that? E flat to what? B flat?
E flat, B flat.
I'm just holding the B flat on.
Hold the B flat.
Yeah. It just doesn't sound right when I hold the B flat though.
It sounds beautiful when you hold the B flat.
Alright.
It's like you ground it.
Too beautiful.
You
You can't understand. You're very
No.
You're still developing.
No, still.
Okay, so we'll start with Jesse setting up the rhythm here.
Okay.
It's setting up the landscape, and we'll
Here
start.
we go. One,
Alright.
2, 3, 1, 2. He's gonna do that.
Yeah, he'll do it.
Here is singer-songwriter Jason Bible, probably best known as the lead musician of the band The Trainwrecks. He is talking about his song Rain Clouds. What other artists do you find inspiration in?
As of late, Hank Williams, always been there.
Actually, one of your songs, Rain Clouds, speaks to the influence of Hank Williams.
Yes, that song's my favorite song I think I've written because it wrote itself at Hank Williams' grave.
Tell us about that.
Well, we were going to Birmingham, Alabama, and I'd been drinking a lot. We were in my wife's car, and I thought we were in Birmingham, and we were in Montgomery. And she woke me up and threw me a packet she had printed up about Hank and stuff I didn't know about Hank's life, and I read it. It was about midnight. We pulled into the cemetery. She kind of pulled the car facing the headlights towards the grave, and I grabbed my Martin, which I had substantially broken on River Street, and I sat down on the bench, and the song just happened, and it's 2 chords. And when I sat there and I realized that I can either choose whiskey or music, and because whiskey was killing me, I was like yellow. I think when I wrote that song, I was in a bad way. And the next morning, we went to the Hank Williams Museum, and that's been close to 7 years ago. And I've been back to the museum and the gravesite 2 separate times since that to kind of rethink things, have a little talk with Hank. This last time we went through Alabama, I sat on my buddy Wade Allen's porch, just thought about if Hank Williams could say anything to me today, what would it be? And the thought that kept popping in my brain was honor your family, take care of your son. The music thing's fleeting. the business is kind of, let's be honest, very fickle and very chew you up and spit you out. So really it's about family first and, God, family, music. And after 3 years of not drinking, I got a portrait of Hank Williams on my right arm. I went back to Chris Autry over at Black Orchid, and he framed it in yesterday. And, last night was the solstice, and it was something I needed to do to keep on the path of not drinking, because I'm terrible at it, Did you want to hear Rain Clouds, like an acoustic version of that real quick?
Rain Clouds.
Yeah. Rain clouds over Montgomery. I hear the lost highway calling me. Down by the tracks there's a whistle blowing. This restless spirit inside me is growing. Woody hop fast, rattlers there. Wrote some songs to change this world's air. And my voice I lift up as an offering. And my voice I lift up as an offering. 'Cause it's all I got to offer. It's all I got to offer. It's all I got to offer to you. Through switchbacks and snow we pressed on. Got some relief from a shot in the wrong arm. That old backseat pills and 80 proof. Old bones went to sleep and left through the roof. And my voice I lift up as an offering. My voice I lift up as an offering. 'Cause it's all I got to offer. 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 It's all I got to offer to you. Rain clouds over Montgomery. I know this lost highway's killing me.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Giving your voice as an offering, that's quite clear. Well, what do some of the other lyrics speak to? What were you thinking at the time?
Well, I wasn't really thinking at the time. I was drinking, and I sat on the bench by that gravesite, and all those words, that's how it arrived. So that was never really written to paper, so I never thought about it twice much. Actually, originally on the acoustic album, it says a voice I offer up as an offering. And then on the Trainwrecks album, Steve said, change offer to lift. So we changed on the Trainwrecks album, it says, a voice I lift up.
I talked with Howard Paul, jazz guitarist and CEO of Benedetto Guitars, a jazz guitar workshop here in Savannah, which crafts some of the finest jazz guitars in the world. Howard spoke to me in his office about the differences between jazz guitars and other types of guitars.
What makes a jazz guitar different from, say, a rock and roll guitar?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, I lecture on that subject at conservatories all over the country and in Europe. Because most guitarists don't know or think about the architecture and history of a jazz guitar. So the short version is Jazz guitar was invented in the 1920s, 1922, by Lloyd Lohr, who worked for Gibson Guitars, and he created the first Gibson L5 model, which was part of a family of instruments, the F5 violin, and he made an M5, I think it's an M5 mandocello, and so if you back up a little bit before 1920, the guitar was a parlor instrument, a stepchild of the musical instrument world. It was intended for folk music and dance and to back up a singer in a parlor environment. And the reason is because guitars, beginning in the 1600s and through their development, are originally gut string and eventually nylon or steel string instruments. Those guitars with the flat top and the flat back and the oval sound hole, the architecture has a flat top and the bridge is literally glued right to the top of the guitar. So when you begin tuning a guitar like that, as you make the strings tighter, you're putting tension on the bridge, pulling it forward. And eventually, tighten it up long enough, or it gets too cold or too hot, or the glue lets go, that bridge will rip right off the top, or warp, or even cause the top to implode. So, in order to keep that from happening, underneath of that flat top, it gets a lot of bracing in order to keep it flat and thin and resonant. And as the result, the bottom line result is it can't project. It sounds great to the person playing it. It doesn't overpower the singer, but it's not of an orchestral volume that allows you to hear it when played with other fine European design instruments. So up until 1920s, the guitar was strictly a parlor instrument, and even into the 1990s, you couldn't go into Juilliard and get a degree in guitar because there was no legitimate classical music repertoire written for that instrument because it wasn't loud enough to project through an orchestra. So that changed with the advent of jazz. Jazz started in New Orleans, 1910 and 1916 or so, in the Storyville area. There's a long story about how Storyville was burnt to the ground, and there was a diaspora of musicians as they moved up the Mississippi River and eventually found their way to places like St. Louis and Memphis and eventually Chicago. Totally different environment in Chicago where it's cold. And by the way, this is the 1920s, so it was during Prohibition. And so this new form of music, jazz, moved indoors and into dance halls and speakeasies, and for the first time, orchestral instruments were playing jazz instead of the New Orleans marching drums and banjo and tuba and maybe an accordion. Everything that worked in New Orleans didn't work in Chicago. And so in 1922, the guitar was developed as the rhythm instrument in an orchestra to replace what had been a banjo in a parade group in New Orleans. And what made the guitar acceptable in that environment was it was built like a violin. So the first jazz guitar had a carved arched top like a violin and a carved maple arched back, same material, spruce top, maple backsides and neck, and ebony or rosewood appointments. And early guitars had a metal tailpiece, but of course Benedetto guitars have the ebony tailpieces. But a violin or trapeze style tailpiece, and that architecture of a floating bridge and tension pushing down on the top allows the top to resonate, and because it's carved into an arch, it's a very strong architectural shape, so you don't have to put a lot of bracing underneath of it like you do that flat top guitar to keep it from destroying itself. And then by the 30s, they developed electronic pickups, and you started to hearing them for the first time as solo instruments. By the 40s, the guitar and electronics improved, and you had Les Paul stepping in and developing the electric guitar. And so the jazz guitar, in its purest form, beginning in 1922, is an acoustic instrument built much like a cello, and that's what we still build here. The most expensive, most coveted Benedettos are very similar to the original 1922 Gibson L5 built by Lloyd Loar. And we use the same extraordinarily fine, long cured materials, and we carve them by hand the same way that fine violins are carved. We still use the same kind of wood glue. We use a hide glue now. It's a tight bond in order to glue everything together. And we are always aiming for that same quality of acoustic sound that's characterized by a jazz guitar. So they're unique. And when rock and roll guitars came in late 40s and early 50s, it took away all of the acoustic quality of the instrument and replaced it with the ability to amplify it without feeding back. And so while we build a couple of instruments like that because people want a guitar that feels like a Benedetto but plays like a Telecaster or Les Paul, we do a few of those, but we really, our focus is on making the best, most balanced, most projective acoustic instruments that can be built today.